A couple of months ago I did a video about my editing computer being really slow and starting to become more and more annoying to use, and since then I've done lots of research into what the next best editing computer would be, and one of the things I've come to the conclusion of, which is a strange way of saying that, but the 12-inch MacBook might be one of the best travel editing laptops you can buy. Well, first of all, it's very small and very thin. It's tablet-sized and it weighs less than a kilogram. This is very important if you want to stuff it in a backpack and not really feel the weight throughout the day. I believe the MacBook Pro 15-inch is about twice the weight of the 12-inch MacBook, whereas the 12-inch MacBook isn't that much heavier than a 12.9-inch iPad Pro, which is pretty impressive for a laptop. And it's got a very nice screen too. It's a Retina screen, it's higher resolution than 1080p, very nice colors too, although it isn't the P3 DCI cinema screen that the iMacs and the MacBook Pro has. So that could be a reason why you'd need a MacBook Pro instead of a 12-inch MacBook. Having said that, all Mac displays are pretty color accurate, so it is good enough for YouTube and very casual color grading. The 12-inch MacBook also has a 9 to 10 hour battery life. Not whilst editing, but it's still going to be a lot more than basically any other laptop on the market, and because it has very low energy usage, efficient components, and it has a USB-C port, it should be very easy to charge it from a USB power bank. So if you want to get some more battery life, you can just carry around a USB power bank and maybe double or even triple the battery life of your 12-inch MacBook. And it's a fanless computer, so that means no deafening all the people around you. You might think that that doesn't happen, but with my laptop it did get quite loud when the fans went up to full speed, but that's not going to happen in the 12-inch MacBook. That could lead to some thermal throttling, but again, it's a travel laptop. And also when you combine the fanless design with the fixed trackpad, which is now using Force Touch, it means that there are much fewer moving components and fewer things to break, which is good if you're traveling because you're likely subjecting your laptop to more abuse and other things. The MacBook does only have one USB-C port, which could be a little bit annoying sometimes. If you pick your accessories carefully so that you can daisy chain USB ports, or if you get a USB-C dongle, then you can work around it, but having two USB-C ports might have been nice. Although because it's USB-C port, you can use it for charging, you can use it for a fast SSD storage, or you can run a 4K external monitor. And if you want a portable dual screen setup, then you can use the Duet app to use an iPad as a second display for your MacBook. The 12-inch MacBook might not have the greatest specs of any laptop in the world, but it's not as bad as you think when you take into account how well optimized Final Cut Pro is, and you should be able to edit 4K videos just fine. In fact, I've watched videos on YouTube of people editing 4K videos in Final Cut Pro, and it really performed even better than my current desktop. You should be able to edit 4K RAW too, and that is pretty impressive. If you're cutting a feature film, you'll probably struggle to do that in 4K with a 12-inch MacBook, but most of the videos I do are less than 10 minutes. Now, your processor options with the 12-inch MacBook, they might not sound the most impressive judging by their base clocks, which I think are all around a gigahertz, but they all turbo up to a quite decent clock speed. The way Final Cut Pro works is, where possible, it tries to avoid loading lots of tasks onto your CPU at once. It will render timelines in the background, and when you're importing footage and transcoding footage to ProRes for optimized media or proxy media, you can still continue editing whilst all that's happening in the background. These short bursts of heavy tasks rather than long sustained load lends itself to processors with higher turbo boosts. And that's probably why Apple lists all of the turbo boosts for its processors on each of its different Mac models. I will admit that looking at the price of even the entry-level 12-inch MacBook, it is quite expensive, but there are very few other notebooks with this level of build quality and design, so it's not overpriced, it's just expensive. And as with every Mac computer, part of the cost is, well, macOS. For someone like me that hates Windows, it is worth paying a little bit more to have OS X. Because of all the engineering that's gone into the 12-inch MacBook, it's never going to be that cheap. But if we judge the computer based off its performance in Final Cut Pro X, rather than the spec sheet, it's probably faster than every other Windows notebook available. Talking of price, even the entry-level 12-inch MacBook is good enough for editing, although personally I would be tempted to go for the top-of-the-range MacBook with the i7, the 16GB of RAM, and the half a terabyte of hard drive space. That does get a little bit more expensive, but I think it's worth it for the added performance and future-proofing. Unfortunately, you don't get a GPU in any of the specifications for the 12-inch MacBook. My guess would be there's just no room and it would take up too much power. Although it's worth noting that you don't get a GPU in any of the 13-inch MacBook Pros either. If you want a GPU in a Mac laptop, you have to get a 15-inch MacBook Pro. Whilst I would normally recommend 32GB of RAM or more for an editing computer, macOS and Final Cut Pro are kind of efficient, and even if the OS does have to page files, the SSD is really fast because it's an NVMe SSD, so paging files isn't the end of the world. And that really fast SSD is going to give you fast loading times for apps and fast boot times too. It's going to create a really fast and responsive computer. I really want my next computer to have an SSD. In fact, whatever computer I buy next, it's definitely going to have an SSD. Having a much more responsive system, having programs that open quickly, it sounds so much better, and I'm not going to have to sit around playing with my fidget spinner whilst I wait for programs to open. I am thinking that a 12-inch MacBook for on-the-go editing combined with an iMac Pro for when you're at home could be a really good setup if you add in a few accessories. And that might be my next editing computer setup. I'm not sure yet, but I am strongly considering it. When you look at a pretty maxed out MacBook Pro plus an LG ultrafine 5K display and a mouse and a keyboard, you're pretty close to the price of an entry-level iMac Pro. And an entry-level iMac Pro is going to outperform even a maxed out MacBook Pro. But I don't know, I've still got a while before I need to make this decision because all Apple computers are very expensive. But I'm still not sure which way I'm going to go. It could go either way, MacBook Pro or 12-inch MacBook plus iMac Pro. I've still got a little while to decide because both setups are going to be pretty expensive. If I want to start getting into doing Blender more, then I think the iMac Pro is going to be a much better option. But one last thing to consider is there are rumours going around that Apple is going to release a new MacBook or an updated 12-inch MacBook sometime in late October. And if that does happen, I'll make an update video talking about the new computer that Apple releases and how good it will be for editing. I've also realised I said October quite weirdly there. I should probably stop talking now. If you enjoyed this video and found it useful, please consider leaving a like and subscribing so as not to miss any new videos. See you later.